Welcome to my basement, everybody, especially you, David W. Collins. You don't go by David W. Collins in regular life, though, do you?
I don't. I'm just David Collins.
David
Yeah, the
Collins.
the W was something that happened when I joined the union, and they said, we have a lot of David Collinses. What's your middle initial? And I was in, but yeah, just David is fine.
So professionally, we will refer to you as David W. Collins.
Sure.
All right,
Yeah.
there you go. Well, I've known David for a number of years. This guy is a very, very fascinating individual because he's got a lot of hyphens in his job title. He's worked on lots of really cool projects. Had a long stint at LucasArts when they were busy making games internally up in their Marin offices, and also in the Presidio in San Francisco. And we first met, I think, working when you were working on the Force Unleashed. But you had lots and lots of relationships and connections all through the Lucas family. And that, I think, has been another big chunk of your career post LucasArts. You've been able to work with Lucas on a number of really cool initiatives, hosting all kinds of awesome events. And I know that you're headed to Star Wars Celebration in London very soon, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But you also worked at Sony on some big games. You were one of the stormtroopers in The Force Awakens, and you've been able to kind of sort of act, because you were one of the main characters in The Force Unleashed as well. I forget the name of the character, though. I'm in so many games.
It was Proxy the droid.
Proxy the droid.
The droid that wanted to kill Star Killer. At every chance he could possibly take, he would try and kill him. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So it's incredibly difficult to sum up all the things that you do. You're also a composer, and you do sound design and audio engineering on things. That's pretty cool, man. You never have a dull day, I imagine.
It's been great. I feel very, very fortunate, and wow, thank you for that intro. I hope I can live up to it. But yeah, we met when you were covering The Force Unleashed, and of course, let me return the favor by saying, my favorite game journalist, and I watched, Electric Playground and Reviews on the Run. I watched the show that you and Tommy did on G4
Judgment
like
Day.
Religiously. Yeah. And it was all a Judgment Day. That's what it was. Yeah. And I loved watching you, because I always think that you have such a great take on games, and so you and I just kind of hit it off. That must have been 2008.
Yeah,
I think it was. Yeah. But yeah, I've been very lucky to basically be able to kind of have my hands in a lot of different areas in game development, in animation, a little bit in film, and then the hosting thing came out of hosting games for LucasArts at E3 starting about 2004 with Republic Commando,
right?
Star Wars Republic Commando, which I was the audio lead on, and I just, as a Star Wars fan and as someone working on the games, just wanted to get out there and talk about our games, and it just turned into this whole second career, which I've been very lucky to enjoy. And you and I saw each other at E3 last week because of that.
It was one of my favorite moments of the whole show, was just to have like a chill sit down and a catch up with you, because we did hit it off. I feel like you're my brother from another mother, and there are a few relationships that I have like that in the video game industry, but it is amazing when you connect with somebody. It's like, I would love to hang out with this guy a lot more.
Yeah.
And we got to do that a bit at E3 this year.
That's right. Yeah, that was really fun. We got to catch up and have lunch right after EA's press conference, and that was great. And it's been a long career in video games. I started at LucasArts back in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
I was at Skywalker Sound as an intern on their scoring stage before that.
Wow.
And immediately started working on Star Wars games. And for all you gamers out there, I mean, that was an incredible time in the games industry, because the PlayStation 2 was about to launch. And once it did, and then the Xbox and the GameCube and everything behind it, there was more work than, could possibly be managed at the time. There was such a huge demand for compelling interactive experiences. Star Wars was blowing up all over again, just like it is now.
Yeah.
And I was very, very busy. And
that was the sweet spot, wasn't it? That era, that time in the video game history when it was, it had to be pretty fantastic production quality and values, no matter what kind of a game it was, but the budgets and the team sizes weren't so crazy that there were companies risking everything for one game. So we had lots of experiments, but they had a production quality that was very impressive.
Yeah, it was a sustainable time, I feel like, but it was also a time of huge change. I mean, you that was really, and I think it was really Spider-Man that did it. The first Spider-Man game that Activision did that really kind of made everybody wake up to the movie tie-ins, and then you enter that period of movie tie-ins where there was a lot of dollars to be made by basically doing the movie tie-in games. And ironically, LucasArts wasn't doing that
Yeah.
really at the time.
Yes.
We were just making video games, cool Star Wars games that the creatives were pitching, and then they would kind of go, because that's how the company was historically. You know, back in the Tim Schafer days, you know,
Yeah.
they were making boutique projects, and the level of artistry was so high, but the risk was low.
Yeah.
Right, as you pointed out. Once you get into the late 2000s, that's when you start seeing people just losing their shirts on all kinds of stuff. And those were difficult years, but I will tell you that some of my fondest memories of game development are at LucasArts, and I wouldn't trade those years for anything. I mean, the games that we did, particularly Republic Commando and the Force Unleashed for me,
Amazing.
and the Lego games and the Monkey Island games. I mean, those were just such good times, man. It was great.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about LucasArts, but I want to add another hyphen, and that is the host of some really well-received and acclaimed podcasts and videocasts out there. The Comlink is one of them, and you've also got a brand new one right now too, right? Or one that's pretty recent. What's that one called?
Well, I've got my big podcast that I do actually is a podcast all about the music of John Williams called Star Wars Oxygen, the music of John Williams, and that's
Amazing.
actually it's part of a thanks. It's been a great show, and the listener count just keeps going up and up, and people are really responding to it, and I think it's because there's a huge hunger to have a conversation about music that isn't in the abstract, and actually get into more of a music appreciation area. Because I feel like and the reason I started the show is because the way that we talk about music is not very developed, yet it's constantly permeating all of our entertainment. Games and movies, and the Marvel universe, the Star Wars universe.
Is it because it's so personal? Is it because your appreciation of music in its myriad forms is really left up to the individual? Except in John Williams' case, where it is the definition of universal.
Yeah, if I was doing a podcast maybe about Coldplay or something like that, I think that a lot of personal taste comes into it, but there's something about popular art that's as big as Star Wars where the music becomes more universal, but its complexity is often kind of alien to people. And so because of that, you just generally don't talk about it. You just know you like it. So to actually get in and say, the way that he's weaving themes through the stories, and the way that he's representing characters and making these alien worlds feel familiar to us, and grounding it in story that everyone's familiar with, has really been very successful, and a lot of people have reached out because of that.
Yeah. I loved his stuff on Force Awakens, by the way. I loved Rey's theme, and just the minimalist kind of way that he brought us into all of that stuff was just amazing. And then you dive deeper in all the behind the scenes, and you hear those echoes even in those sequences, and it just brings chills up your spine, man. It's amazing work.
He does a great job, and he's 84 years old, and he's done over 100 movies. And
did he do the BFG soundtrack?
He did.
I just saw that, and the music's amazing. That's probably all I can say about that right now.
Yeah. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I'm definitely going to go see it. I've turned into a real John Williams fanboy. I've started collecting all of his old stuff from the 70s, and all the stuff pre-Star Wars and even pre-Jaws, and he really is kind of the emotional context behind a lot of our movie greats.
Totally.
Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and I think people are really starting to recognize that, especially this late in his life. What a tremendous contribution he has had, and the AFI just honored him, their 44th ceremony about a week ago.
Yeah.
And so we're in a renaissance of popular culture and movies and comic book movies and Star Wars movies, and you look back and you realize not only has John Williams kind of set the bar, but he's still doing it.
Yeah, and he's been a consistent through line all the way, and he's going to do Indy 5, and he's going to do Episode 8, and
we hope.
Yeah. We hope, yes, and hopefully Episode 9 as well. Yeah, love that guy. Okay, well, I have a great question for you then. You have to pick your favorite. Your favorite score from John Williams. Pick among the many babies that he's put out into the world. What's your favorite baby?
Outside of Star Wars or including Star Wars?
Any of them.
Well, Star Wars is the obvious one, right?
Yeah.
And of those, I would have to say it's probably a toss-up between. You can't beat the original, but The Empire Strikes Back,
Yeah. The Emperor's
is really the Emperor's theme for Return of the Jedi was great. Yeah, but The Empire Strikes Back, you have the Imperial March.
The Imperial March. That's what I mean.
That period of time was just incredible. And you listen to that, and then you listen to Raiders, and you listen to E.T. Those were all done, in the span of less than 3 years.
It's unfathomable, right? Yeah. Like who
Yeah,
else could do that? Yes.
yeah. Not to mention he did so many other movies like Superman and of course people you just do a list of movies and people have no idea. There are lesser known soundtracks that I really love. The soundtrack for Hook is amazing, no matter what you think of the movie. It was great. And even lesser known stuff, like the Cowboys or Far and Away, or he won his first Oscar for the soundtrack to Fiddler on the Roof in 1971 by turning that into a soundtrack. So the guy's been around for a long time. He did all of Lost in Space. He even did 20 episodes of Gilligan's Island. So if you really get deep into John Williams, you just cannot believe that he's been doing this now since the 1950s.
Unbelievable. Wasn't and I don't mean to compare the two because it's certainly not the same caliber of talent, but wasn't Mike Post similarly in the 80s the TV soundtrack guy with he did Magnum PI, and I'm sure he did
yeah.
He had all these catchy hook driven themes for all of these popular TV shows, and it was like he was in every show. I guess Bear McCreary is kind of similar to that.
He's kind of doing that right now, with The Walking Dead and Battlestar, and of course his incredible performance that he turned in at the Sony press conference, which was just blew me away.
That was amazing, wasn't it? That was a show that we were all to be in that auditorium. We were privileged to have that opportunity. That was crazy.
I wasn't. I hold my E3 experience cheap for not being there and watching it at home. But I was just amazed at the level of production value and the level of content that is finally coming. And of course, I worked at Sony from 2011 to 2015. I had an office in Santa Monica Studios. So I was familiar with a lot of those games that they showed and were finally revealed. But I can honestly say there were things in there that I had no idea were coming.
Sure.
And just blew me away. They are just going after it with everything they have, and it's really fun to see and watch. A lot of colleagues' hard work pay off in such a satisfying way.
Yeah, there was a tremendous amount of unbelievably polished AAA, explosive, fun entertainment there. But Sony also managed to kind of tap into some really cool emotional core content. And Days Gone was one of those things. But I think the thing that really shocked everybody was Kratos' son and the relationship that he had with him, and it was chillingly cool. It was just such an amazing sort of reinvention of that franchise. I was really, really impressed, and I was really impressed with the way that they maintained the let the games speak for themselves all the way through the experience. It was really impressive.
That was the most impressive part of all the production value was, it takes a level of confidence to let the product speak for itself and not wrap it around, marketing speak. There was no need. They didn't need to. And it really clearly showed, having, as you have, you do these presentations and sometimes, you're really pushing to get a very clear message across. And other times you just put it up on the screen and you don't have to. It's just so clear that what they have is just golden. And that was definitely the case with Sony. Really, really great to see.
Yeah, because half the time in that situation, you're not just there to show a trailer. You're there to kind of explain, how you got the budget to do this great big project. And in these cases, they were unique enough from each other, but all sort of tapping into, the addictive qualities of games that we all want, but also providing kind of like an indie caliber emotional strain. And I think honestly, and you must have been working at Sony as Naughty Dog was putting the finishing touches on The Last of Us. I think that game in particular has lifted up the capabilities of the entire industry, and certainly has been an influence over at Sony. You can kind of feel it across a lot of their titles.
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, my job at Sony was a service job. It was really about servicing all the different studios, whatever you need. I ran a department of sound designers and dialogue folks for all the different studios for SEEA, the American branch of Worldwide Studios.
Yeah.
And that was, even though it was a service role and a lot of my job wasn't, the sort of sexy sound design stuff that I was doing at LucasArts, I learned so much because I got to sit and watch all the different processes that the different studios had. Santa Monica has such a strong, unique identity. Naughty Dog has such a strong, unique identity. And I staffed Uncharted 3, The Last of Us, and Uncharted 4 with sound designers for Naughty Dog. And, that was really more my contribution, was casting brilliant sound designers and then watching them be brilliant. And I have to say, getting to watch Naughty Dog go through the making of The Last of Us, and then into U4, you're just watching a studio mature and just do incredible things right before your eyes. And I had a few days on the mocap stage, and you just watch Neil Druckmann, and you watch the actors, and you watch the backbone of Sony, the folks that help process all the shots and run the mocap stages and all that kind of stuff. And it's such a unique company, and it was really a pleasure to watch how all that stuff was produced.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the glory days of LucasArts, because I think I speak for a huge number of people out there that were devastated with its closure and with the firing of so many people and the sort of condensing and consolidating into Disney. We've just seen something very similar now with Disney Infinity happen, and we're, I think, as longtime gamers, all concerned about Disney's sort of commitment to bringing out awesome games based on their characters. It's great that they're doing licensing deals with Electronic Arts, and it looks like EA is not going to squander it. It's also great to see that Disney's letting Marvel run with it too, because I think that Spider-Man reveal was one of the big things of E3 as well, and I can't wait for a AAA Spider-Man game again.
Great.
Yeah, great fit, right? But LucasArts was a very special place. And the first question I have for you is, how the hell did you keep your shit together? Because you were such a Star Wars fanboy. How did you not go in and freak out on your first sort of meetings and then sort of hold it together as you started to get more and more involved with everything in there?
Probably just pure... it's funny, it's pure ambition and professionalism. I think that, there's a certain... catch-22 to being a fan of this stuff, because when I first started, I was very tight-lipped about those things. I really didn't talk about being a Star Wars fan. I didn't talk about, and it's particularly at Skywalker Sound. I talked about audio fidelity, and I talked about great recordings, and I talked about great movie mixes. But the older I got and more established in my career, I just thought, well, if you're not doing what you love, why do you work in video games? And of course I love Star Wars. And then once I crossed that threshold into hosting Star Wars Celebration almost 10 years ago, and I met Star Wars fans, the people that really played those games, the satisfaction that I got out of understanding the end experience of something that I worked so hard on and therefore had no perspective on, was deeply satisfying to me, and it kind of reconnected me to being a Star Wars fan in a way that seemed okay. And one nice thing I will say about LucasArts is that, being a Star Wars fan was a huge asset there, and it wasn't ever frowned upon. In fact, I don't think it is now anywhere in Lucasfilm. I think it's a huge asset. Someone's like, what is TIE stand? It's Twin Ion Engine. That's a TIE fighter. Like, if you know that stuff, then suddenly you get invited to meetings that you weren't invited to before. And that's
awesome.
That's kind of what happened, and eventually I was able to, work a little bit on the story of The Force Unleashed, and certainly design meetings and, Republic Commando and all of that, and eventually was writing in-game dialogue, not just for Star Wars, but for franchises like Thrillville and other games like that, which I wrote a lot of music for, and was able to actually write a little bit for Force Unleashed. I mean, that was incredible, and so it was a real asset. And the way you just keep yourself from freaking out, I don't know. I think you have to demonstrate a level of commitment and professionalism, and enough trade secrets have to pass your desk successfully without leaking that after a while you just get used to it, and that becomes your fandom in a way. You want to be a creative part of it, and you want to inspire the way that inspired you as a kid, or still continues to inspire you. So,
how much was George Lucas around while you guys were making these games? I know that the Force Unleashed, had huge numbers, and I think that George actually went to the like the 12 midnight, the sales events for the game, or at least its sequel. Was he around? Was he paying attention? Was he participating? Was he a part of the creative at all with you guys?
This was all above my pay grade, but he definitely. I had more than one trailer that I had to mix, or video that I had to finish, or demo to set up that was going to go in front of him throughout that entire time. He was involved. I think that in the case of George Lucas, I mean, he started Lucasfilm Games in 1982 and had a strong interest in technology, just like he started Pixar, just like he started ILM in 75. He really wanted to push THX, he wanted theaters to have better sound, better picture.
He's amazing, man. He's amazing.
He's one of my personal heroes.
Totally.
But what I've learned with years in perspective, I guess, away from it, now that we're in a new era with Kathleen Kennedy and Disney, and I've worked at, I spent years at Sony, and now I'm at Achille Interactive, is that he's one man, and he had 3 prequel movies to make, plus Indiana Jones, plus Red Tails, plus 6.5 seasons of the Clone Wars. I mean, the guy, plus he was running the companies, and the guy was doing so much. And you look at how Star Wars is blown up now, and they're doing 5 movies in 5 years, and plus a TV show, plus everything in EA and comic books and novels and licensing. I mean, the demand is through the roof. Yeah. And I just don't know, even in those years, which are relatively quiet, I don't know how he could have been more involved without saying, you know what, I'm going to put pickup shoots for episode 3 on hold because I want to finish out this milestone on Force Unleashed or something. I mean, I just don't see how it could do. So, you have people in place to do that. But, the DNA of Lucasfilm is that it's a story company and a film company, and games are, and this is really something that came into perspective to me when I was at Sony. Anyone who works in games, and certainly people who passionately play games, knows what a deep commitment it is to the process of software development. You're developing software, and that means that there are so many gotchas, there's so much unexpected chaos that happens, sometimes wonderful, sometimes a huge setback. And, really, really successful game companies iterate on their code. They iterate on their gameplay and design, because giving birth to the first one is so difficult.
Yeah.
I think about Rockstar. The first big successful Grand Theft Auto game was GTA 3, right? That was their 3rd one. Besides Force Unleashed 2 and a game called Jedi Starfighter, LucasArts was trying to be, Star Wars is so many different things, and it means so many different things to so many different people. And I just don't see how one internal studio can deliver all of those things successfully.
Especially in this sort of modern era of budgets that are through the roof and 1,000-person teams. I mean, it's really impossible. It's
really hard, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because the risk is astronomical now. Yeah. To make a AAA title like that, if you're going to a studio that has a track of success record, or successful track record, like EA Dice, right? They can build a Battlefront. Well, that's what happened with Pandemic Studios. We knew that they could build a Battlefront. That's what happened with TT Games and Lego. We knew that they could build those things. And so as the industry started shrinking and studios started going under, there just were less and less options for making a gajillion Star Wars games. This is all my opinion. It's not Lucas's or Sony's or anybody else's. But
your
having lived through it, my perspective, and when LucasArts closed, I was watching from a distance, and I have to confess, I was heartbroken. Because they had some really good stuff in development, but I also kind of understood it after what happened on Force Unleashed 2, and in that it was a huge undertaking, and someone like Sony PlayStation or a game company or EA, for example, has the resources and the management and the engineers and the staff and the track record to pull off big experiences. And as Jim Ward once wisely said, if it's not big, it's not Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
And he was right. I will say that LucasArts was one of the most fantastic places I've ever worked, and I am lucky to have friends in almost every studio in the business now because of my time at Lucas and at Sony, and the talent and the drive, and of course Star Wars. They were wonderful times, but who knows what the future holds. I'm just glad that we still have Star Wars games to play, and ironically, I have a lot of friends who used to be at LucasArts or used to be at Sony that are now working on those titles, and it's a small world. It's a small world. A lot of ex LucasArts employees still working on Star Wars.
It was pretty amazing to see that EA video, which my friend Jade Raymond was all over. Right, it was very surreal.
Right.
It was incredible for me to see her up on stage and say, "May the Force be with you." After all of that, her first segment on EP was a Star Wars segment, by the way, for Republic Command. Walking with Matt Schell, who we were having lunch with, talking about that game. So it was a very surreal thing. And you interviewed her for the Star Wars show, right?
Right. So I'm not doing the Comlink anymore. The Comlink was a show that we, my friend J.C. Reifenberg and I started on Kevin Smith's YouTube channel. Eventually, just kind of did our own thing because we were so excited about all the new Star Wars that was coming out, the comics and the games, and of course this was a lead up to the Force Awakens. The Star Wars show is really doing that work for us now. They really are doing an incredible job, and I was very. They invited me to basically be a correspondent that day, and I of course gleefully said yes. We had done the Force Awakens premiere together. I got to do the live stream of the Force Awakens Hollywood premiere, and so that they just called me back, and of course I jumped at it.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, I was very happy, and I'm sure that you were too, to see the scale of the projects that EA is working on with these games.
Yeah.
The fact that Respawn has got one coming out, which is going to be different from the Motive one, which is going to be different from the Visceral Games one, and Battlefront. I'm still playing. After this, are you in Battlefront as well? Do you have?
I am the voice of the Celestins and Nine Numb in Battlefront. Yes,
that is amazing.
I screamed in a Celestin voice, and then they pitched it up a little bit more beyond that.
That's awesome. So, can you give us some Nine Numb?
Oh, what did I do? It was crazy. I think I was just screaming like, "What a terrible Kalana!" Like just like crazy stuff for like 3 hours straight, and then of course the emotes that you can unlock. Those were super fun too. Doing all those, But yeah, that was a really fun game to be involved in.
That's awesome. And when you did that game, were you working with people that you had worked with before at LucasArts, or how did that all come together?
No, actually, that was funny because a couple of yes, actually, because my boss Dara O'Farrell was the signatory on that, and he was the guy that ran the audio department at LucasArts for years, and he was the voice director on classic games like Monkey Island 4, Grim Fandango. And he is now basically, and this is what I mean, there are a lot of LucasArts people still working on Star Wars.
They just pollinated Star Wars all over the industry, right?
Yeah, exactly. So he was working on that, and then I was in another game, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, which just came out, and that was also EA Dice, and so my buddy Patrick Michalek, who was working there at the time, he cast me in that, and then it was just kind of this weird small world thing where suddenly I walk into the studio and there's Patrick from DICE again, and Dara, so it was just kind of like this meeting of worlds. But I started recording Mirror's Edge back in, I think, 2014 was my first session for that.
That turned out pretty cool. It's a good game.
Yeah.
It's not Battlefront. It's not DICE's biggest high budget amazing experience, but it's pretty damn cool.
It's super addicting game mechanic, and it's Mirror's Edge. It's a sequel to Mirror's Edge. How awesome is that?
Well, I just love that EA brought that and paid DICE to make it, or paid for DICE to make it, and who was expecting a sequel? And it's actually pretty slick. It runs very well. What character do you play in Mirror's Edge Catalyst?
Most of the characters I do are guards that you take out.
Yeah.
And I did a little bit of facial capture on it. And then I played some background characters in Faith's life, and I think honestly I lose track. I must have played. It was all supporting role stuff. I played probably about 6 or 10 characters, something like that, throughout the game. So a lot of yelling, some flashbacks, things like that.
That's awesome. Was Proxy your first character that you saw fully realized in a video game, or had you been doing some stuff already before?
The first real character, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I was the voice of all the Trandoshans in Republic Commando, but that's so unrecognizable because I was basically just,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
like just clearing my throat, for months at a time in front of a microphone and then processing it. I had done a lot of Aliens in Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, the BioWare and Obsidian titles, respectively. And, a lot of weird grunting and growling in the Lego Indie and Star Wars games.
Yes.
But that was probably in a lot of battle droids and things. But that was really the first real named character that I got to do, and that was super super fun. And we were talking about before we started the stream that Sam Witwer and I have been close for many years, and he went to Juilliard with my best friend Patrick Hallahan growing up, and when they were at Juilliard, I just started working at Lucas, and we just struck up a friendship, and that friendship continued for many years. And I watched him book Battlestar and Dexter and all that stuff, and then I was trying to figure out how to get him into a LucasArts title for years, and then The Force Unleashed happened, and I swear to you, the concept artist Amy Beth Christensen, she drew a picture that looked exactly like him.
That's amazing.
And so my old boss Dara at the time said, I need to give a lot of credit for this, because he said, that looks like your friend Sam. And I said, I know. He said, so I said, Sam, I can't tell you why, but send me your video demo and your resume. And he slipped it. I just slipped it into the pile. Didn't tell anybody I knew him. And then he showed up for the audition, and I was reading across from everybody that auditioned at the time, which is kind of one of the ways I got proxy.
Right.
And I auditioned with him, and of course called him afterwards. And then he got the part, and I swear to you, as we were shooting it, people didn't believe that I knew him. Like,
awesome.
They thought I was trying to be cool, and I was like, yeah, he's my buddy. And they're like, yeah, that guy's your buddy. It was great.
He does look like a walking video game character in a way, doesn't he? I mean, he looks like somebody drew the dude.
He does. He's got those very strong features and very dramatic looking guy, but just the nicest, sweetest guy. Huge video gamer, huge Star Wars and Star Trek fan.
He loves all of this stuff. That's the great thing about, because we've obviously had him on the show, and I've met him to hang out for brunch, I think, when he was at a big con in Toronto, and he's a sweet, down-to-earth dude that loves this stuff as much as us. I know that he's streaming games every once in a while on Twitch these days.
Yeah, we did a Force Unleashed stream together that we still haven't finished.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
That was really fun. Yeah, if you go to his, I think it's just / Sam Witwer, I think.
Yeah.
He's up on Twitch, and it's funny because we did Force Unleashed 2, and then years later got to be Stormtroopers together in The Force Awakens, which was great.
How did that come together? How did that come together?
Matthew Wood, who is the supervising sound editor and really, who, by the way, started as a tester at LucasArts back with The Secret of Monkey Island in 1990.
He's working on movies now?
Yeah, so
That's
when
amazing.
Ben Burt, the sound designer on Star Wars, came out of retirement, Matthew Wood was kind of picked from QA at LucasArts to basically show Ben Burt how to use computers. I mean, this is like early 90s type of stuff, right?
Wow.
And just basically apprenticed under him as they digitized all of his sound effects.
When they were doing the prequels.
Even before the prequels. So they knew that they were going to start gearing up to do the prequels, but this must have been early 90s. You'd have to
for the special editions?
Probably, yeah, for the
special,
definitely for the special editions, but then certainly for the prequels. And then, Matthew ended up being one of the editors on The Phantom Menace, then even more so on Attack of the Clones, and then, of course, played General Grievous. Something about sound guys playing
amazing.
Villains or something. Poor Matty probably thinks I'm always chasing his coattails. He's like, oh, yeah, proxy. But he did General Grievous, and then eventually just, he did WALL-E and There Will Be Blood and the Star Trek movies, and had a relationship with JJ and, Super 8. And he's done so many movies now, and now he's just, super in demand. And did The Force Awakens. So we were, I think, just hanging out, I don't know, a year ago or something, and he made an offhanded comment to me, and I think we were with Sam, too, at the time, and he said, yeah, when we do The Force Awakens, post-production, I should bring you guys in to do some voices. Ha, 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 ha.
Yeah.
Thinking that, and sure enough, last October, I got an email show up at Fox, and we have a movie that will be forcefully awakening in December, I think is what he said.
So they were doing all that stuff in October, and the movie was out in December? That's how late in
Yeah.
the process it is? Holy crap. I guess, right?
It's
It's a
quite-
linear
well,
thing, right?
Yeah, it used to be, I think, back when I was an intern at Skywalker, I remember I was a production assistant on The Haunting. Do you remember that movie?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was 2 weeks before it was supposed to be in theaters. And I was an intern, so I was currying visual effects from Phil Tippett's studio in Berkeley back to Skywalker Ranch so the picture editors could physically place the negatives into the master print
Amazing.
so that they could do the final print master on the mix stage so that then they could go take it to Technicolor or something to work around the clock in order for the physical prints to arrive in canisters in theaters across North America.
Yeah.
So it was 2 weeks back then. That was late 90s. So now with digital, I mean, yeah, I think it needed to be ready basically for whenever the first public screening was, and it was down to the wire. But most movies are nowadays.
Yeah.
So that's nothing really special. But yeah, it was in October, and about 20 of us were all in a booth. And before it started, Matt said, the engineer, she's been here since the late 70s, and she said this is the very room where they recorded Frank Oz for Empire to do all of his looping.
Oh my God.
And we all just got chills, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I'm there, and, a lot of the Clone Wars cast is there, too. Matt Lanter and James Arnold Taylor and Tom Kane, and,
We've had all those guys on the show. They're awesome.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're just the sweetest people. And I knew them because I voice directed probably about 4 or 5 Clone Wars video games for LucasArts.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all there together, plus a lot of voiceover actors, in the industry and looping professionals. And we just screamed at the screen for, 9 hours one day in October. And then I showed up and I had some Stormtrooper lines in the theater. And Sam and I got to improv down the hall about... TC-17s, which is like the TC-16s they talk about in the original. Well, the upgrades are terrible. And we just had we're improvising lines in what is going to be one of the biggest movies of all time. And we're just at lunch just going, God, just pinch me right now. This is incredible. So that was really fun to just be able to have those long-lasting friendships endure, from the beginning of LucasArts and still be able to be involved and things, including next month in London at Star Wars Celebration.
It's amazing, and it's incredible to see how it's all interconnected as well. Like you guys are all professionals learning different disciplines and working in different areas, but when it comes to telling stories, which is what you were just talking about with Lucas, it kind of blends, and you have, I think, a great deal of respect across those disciplines and for what each one of you can do. In terms of The Force Awakens, did any of that stuff end up actually on camera, on the screen? Can we look for those pieces?
I think my biggest line in the movie is I go up to Kylo Ren and I say, what is it? I'm going to screw this up. I say, "Sir, the droid was spotted heading west with a girl." And
he says, what girl or something like that?
Yeah. No, that's a different scene.
Okay.
When they've run out into the woods, and I just basically let him know he's out there, and then a lot of just like shields up, that kind of stuff, and it's all background stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff.
And what does it feel like to see that? Because I love that movie. I'm sure you love that movie. But what does it feel like to sit in the theater, watch that, and hear your voice come off the screen from one of the characters?
It was unreal. It was unreal. And I have to tell you that they were gracious enough to put our names in the credits. So seeing your name in blue against the Black Starfield with John Williams playing, I may or may not have wept like a little boy. May or may not have. No, it was great.
We all understand, man. Everybody watching this right now, we get it.
It's Star Wars. It's to be able to contribute to something that was such a huge inspiration to you and now continues to be. I've got 6 nieces, and taking one of the older ones to see The Force Awakens and watching her react to Rey was huge.
Yeah.
The way that I reacted to it as a kid. So yeah, that stuff is great.
Let's talk about this Force Awakens thing, because there are still detractors and there's still criticism about it, and certainly it's not as seminal and perfect, and how could it be, as the original Star Wars or even the follow-up Empire. It just can't reach those heights. But man, did JJ have everything going against him, right? Like, he had all of our doubt, and still he and the whole team revitalized this franchise so that we're all curious about where they're going to take us on this ride, and we're all sitting on pins and needles, and we have high hopes, and there's like a general positivity about where Star Wars is going to take us. That you were at Lucas when the prequels were coming out, and I don't think it was the same.
I'll tell you, the prequels were very different. I mean, I spent most of the prequels working on tie-in games, and saw episode 3 in its rough cut form, and was lucky enough to read the script for episode 2 before I saw the movie. Force Awakens was great because it was the first movie since The Phantom Menace where, well, actually, that's not true. I thought I was going to go in cold, and then I saw the whole thing in black and white with no sound on a dubbing stage. But but even then, seeing it from there and then seeing it in the theater, I mean, I was blown away by it. I will say that, J.J. Abrams has been saying the following a lot. He said it in behind-the-scenes footage, on the Blu-ray of The Force Awakens, and he said it again at the John Williams AFI tribute that happened a couple weeks ago, which is, George Lucas got so many things right. The reason why it is a modern marvel, a modern miracle, the first Star Wars, is it is so rare to get all of those things right, every single decision right, and especially in the face of such insurmountable odds, right? I mean, he really does have that rebellious spirit, and he made those movies. Movies are a product of their time, and that time was screaming for, post-Vietnam was screaming for a positive, uplifting movie like that because of the cynicism of in the late 70s. And so, that is true also with The Force Awakens. And what I will say about The Force Awakens is they just nailed the tone, they nailed the feel, they nailed the relationships,
the magic.
The performances. It had that feeling like what I felt as a kid. And the last thing I would add to that is I remember having a really interesting conversation with Sam about his first Darth Maul appearance in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And the following week was his second. So in the span of a week, we watched fan opinion change pretty drastically because it was such a shock to the system when they first saw the first episode. And, he's kind of nuts and he's got spider legs. And, by the time you get to an episode a week later, it airs, everyone's opinion had changed. But in that week, you watched a lot of people panic, because this isn't the Darth Maul I know.
Yeah.
And eventually, the Darth Maul that we got was so immensely satisfying because of all of that setup at the beginning. Well, the reason I bring that up is because we don't know who Rey's parents are or if that even matters. Yeah. We don't know what eventually is going to happen with Kylo Ren. We don't know what Luke Skywalker is going to say.
Yeah.
We don't know any of those things right now. And this is a very brief period in our history as Star Wars fans that will be over next year when Episode 8 comes out.
And it's stuff we can't even imagine, but all the prequel stuff, and this was what George Lucas had to contend with, and he had some very clever ideas in there, but all of that prequel stuff, we had imagined it. And there was no way that he was going to make 3 movies that were as good as the 3 movies we had made in our imaginations, and even from reading classic novels and sort of piecing stuff together. There was no way. He had it all against him. But these guys, especially this troupe of unbelievable creators that Kathleen and her crew are putting together to shepherd these movies, they're at the top of their game, man. We're gonna go into some really wild places. I cannot wait. Rogue One's looking incredible.
Yeah, that trailer was awesome.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that Star Wars traditionally was 3 movies, and those 3 movies stood on, pillars, and they were untouchable. Now we've had 7 movies and 2 animated shows and video games and comic books. Eventually what'll happen with Star Wars, in my opinion, is the same thing that happened to Star Trek. There's more out there than there was. And so we're not so much going to be scrutinizing every single frame. Maybe we will.
Yeah.
Some of us will.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit. I think we have to take a longer view, I guess, is my point.
Right.
When you take a long view at Star Wars, it really does present a real satisfying experience. I mean, the prequels. My opinion of the prequels has changed over the years, in that I kind of understand what George was trying to do, and he actually kind of he kind of told us, I'm making true prequels and I'm world building here. I don't want to do what I already did over again.
Yeah.
And I think the common mistake that we as fans can make is to assume that he just doesn't see it.
Yeah.
That he forgot how. He didn't forget how. He just wasn't interested in doing that anymore.
Yeah. No,
right?
and that's his MO. I mean, that's what he does. He does.
That's what he always did.
Yep, totally.
And you go back and watch Return of the Jedi. I remember watching Return of the Jedi at the 30th anniversary screening in 2013, and the guy says, "You rebel scum." And I'm thinking, I was so young when this movie came out, and I love every frame of it. Had I been 12, I don't know what I would have thought of Ewoks.
Yeah.
Maybe I would have, and people who are, in their 50s that say, I saw Return of the Jedi as a teenager. It wasn't nearly as good as the first two.
Yeah.
But I love them. And you start going, well, actually, Jedi's not that different from The Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
It feels like it is, but, because you have all these different characters, but
in
you
tone
can see
and sort of the kid-friendly kind of qualities of it. And I do believe that Lucas did shift and transition to try to make stuff that was going to appeal to a whole family. And it started, I think, with Jedi. Because Star Wars and Empire, pretty dark in some places and pretty heavy in some places. And I was a kid and saw Star Wars in the theater, and I was scared to go because the ads with Darth Vader and Chewbacca were freaking me out, and then I went and it changed my life. But I think Return of the Jedi was a little bit more accessible because of the Ewoks. It got a little bit more silly. And I think having the focus on children and Jar Jar and all that stuff in the prequel movies was an obvious, deliberate attempt to kind of, bring more families together, because Lucas had, I think, wisely sort of accepted that this was not just for a demographic. This was for everybody. This is for the entire planet. And JJ picked up that baton wonderfully, I think, with the new one.
I think so, and I think that our opinion of The Force Awakens will evolve over the years.
Yeah.
Is kind of what I was getting at earlier, is that, what you think about it in 2016 will not be the same thing that you think about it after you've seen all three films, 7, 8, and 9. And the setup work that they had to do, and anytime you're working on a script and you're working on story, for those of you listening and watching that deal with story and creative writing, exposition, explaining the world and the plot is always the hardest part. It's so boring for an audience to sit through, so your job is to think of creative ways to get through it. The Force Awakens, I didn't even feel the exposition. Yeah. It just felt like a wild ride, but yet they had all this work to establish with the First Order and the Resistance and Kylo Ren and Jakku and Rey, and introduce Finn and all their stories and characters.
Create a lot of mystery too, which I think was incredibly effective. Like, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
The one thing that I have about Star Wars, the one question, it's the root of its name, is like, is it just perpetual war in this galaxy? Like, are they always just going to fight? Is this just going to go on and on and on? Will there ever be peace? I guess Star Peace wouldn't sell tickets, but it just feels like, man, these poor citizens of these planets just cannot get along.
Well, I think the closest thing we had to Star Peace was the beginning of the Phantom Menace. Mm-hmm. There was the trade routes are in dispute and taxation, which is a big deal because economies go down and people starve, and that started out as sort of a pedestrian feeling thing that didn't feel like Star Wars. And again, with the prequels, George starts in, this is what peacetime looks like, now watch it totally crumble into chaos over 3 movies.
Right.
He takes the innocent little kid and basically turns him into the
heinous, evil
monster.
Creature.
It's a very daring thing to do. He was more interested in the macro than in the momentary storytelling, and
sure.
It falls under criticism for that, and I certainly understand, I guess, but the older I get, the more I kind of see the long view of Star Wars, and I appreciate what he did as a creative.
Yeah, totally, and even if you fault him for some casting and some character stuff, I mean he's just a badass. He's just gone off and done what he's wanted to do. And even selling to Disney, I'm sure he could have just held out and said, nope, it's going to be $50 billion. And they probably would have had to get the money together to do it. But it's just like, yeah, I'm done. You guys do this.
Go ahead. And then he puts one of the most legendary producers of all time, Kathleen Kennedy, in charge of the company.
Awesome.
We would have no E.T. without, Amblin Entertainment and you know the Marshall Kennedy producing team. We would have no Indiana Jones. We would have no Jurassic Park. We wouldn't have any of these great things. And you know, they all are part of the same creative conversation. We started by talking about John Williams, and I think about all of these folks that have given us literally decades of cutting edge entertainment and the best. And they're continuing that tradition. I mean, and you talked about George, and one of the reasons why he's my personal hero is, you're right, it's not just Star Wars. It's also that he started ILM. And without ILM, there would be no even classic Star Trek movies with the original cast. There would, you know, in terms of visual effects, there would be no dinosaurs.
Non-linear editing. I mean,
he created what eventually became Avid and Pro Tools. He created
we
Pixar.
Wouldn't be here being able to do what we have done and grow, and I doubt we'd have this, you know, this streaming technology and streaming capabilities without thinking about digitally bringing all of this content in and finding, you know, easier ways to disseminate it. Yeah, he's a brilliant, amazing human being. And
amazing.
I think what we're kind of discovering in this conversation, because it's turned into a George Lucas love fest, which I'm totally cool with, is that he also was smart enough to really surround himself with the best people in the world over and over and over again. And that, you know, that just kept growing and growing, and that circle widening, and that common love. And I think Star Wars is that beating heart, you know, like people just love this franchise and this property. So let's talk a little bit about what you're going to be doing at Star Wars Celebration. How many Star Wars celebrations have you been to?
The first one I went to was for Revenge of the Sith in 2005. The first one that I hosted a stage on was almost 10 years ago in 2007. So at this point, I don't know.
This will be your 10th one? They don't happen every year, though, right?
They don't happen every year, although this is the second year in a row where there's one.
They'll happen every year from now on.
I hope so. Yes. I hope so. But I've been to a lot, and I've hosted since 2007. I think 5 or 6 of them, and it's 3 or 4. In this case, it's 3 days of talking about comics and games and movies, and
sounds like
talking
a total
to the folks
drag.
That make Star Wars. It's awesome, and you meet really incredible, passionate people that come to these things from all over the world. I did Celebration in Germany 3 years ago, and you know, meeting the crowd in Germany was so cool. Orlando, Florida, you know, recently had, you know, a string of horrible tragedies.
That's unreal. Yeah.
I've been down there multiple times, and I will tell you that you see some of the sweetest, like, coolest people, Star Wars fans anywhere in North America. I mean, you know, there's great people all throughout all the different places I've had Celebration. And
will this be
that's
the first
really the
one
best
in
part.
London? The one that's
this
coming
will
up?
be my first one in London. They did one in 2007, and I couldn't go, I think, because of E3 that year, and my Force Unleashed schedule prevented me from going. But there was one in London in 2007. So it's technically the third one in Europe.
Okay.
It'll be 3 days in mid-July in London, just talking about Star Wars. And Warwick Davis is hosting the main stage, and then I'm hosting what's called the Galaxy stage, which will have a lot of cool content. We haven't announced our panels yet, but we will soon at StarWarsCelebration.com. And then Amy Ratcliffe, who's a writer and frequent contributor and my co-host on the Comlink, she's going to be hosting a stage as well. So it's just going to be a big party for a week in London. And then I'm playing guitar and drums with a Star Wars cover band.
What?
And and Darth Elvis and a to be named headliner at a gig called hashtag Cantina, or hashtag This Is Cantina.
Yeah.
At the O2 Brooklyn Bowl on that Thursday night before that. So people just come into town, like Star Wars fans come into town, and it's not like Comic-Con. It's all geared towards Star Wars, right?
And it's about the fan. I mean, we've covered the events before, and it isn't like Comic-Con or E3. It's not press stuff. There is some press to cover around the whole event, but it's not like, let's go and get tons of interviews and there's lots of stories all over. You kind of have to chase through and find that kind of stuff, but it's not as orchestrated as E3 or Comic-Con. These events are for everybody to come in and celebrate, as the name implies, their mutual love of this. Who have you met in the Star? You know, obviously you've met George and Ben Burt and the people that actually worked at Skywalker, but in terms
Yeah.
of actors and celebrities, and what has this close affiliation with this brand allowed you to kind of enjoy along the way?
I've done interviews with, uh, well, everyone from the main cast, the original cast, except for Harrison Ford.
Mm.
So Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, Anthony Daniels, Peter Mayhew, Warwick Davis, pretty much all of them. A lot of the, I've met a lot of the officers. I've met a
Billy
lot of the
D. Williams?
volunteers. Billy D. I did an interview. I did my first interview with Billy D. actually on the red carpet for the Force Awakens premiere.
Right on.
He was great, and I got to briefly chat with Greg Grunberg, who plays Snap Wexley, the X-wing pilot in
Yep.
Force Awakens. But haven't really had a chance to sit down with the new cast. I would be thrilled to do that. A lot of people behind the scenes, of course, John Knoll and the good folks at ILM, Skywalker Sound. It is my dream to one day get to interview John Williams. I hope we can make it happen, because that's another one of my just personal heroes, obviously, as I said at the beginning of the stream.
Does he do a lot of interviews?
He doesn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't do a lot of interviews.
I guess he's busy making awesome music all the time, right? This is the
Awesome
guy that
music all
doesn't
the time.
stop, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just a lot of people throughout the years, and in the prequels. Probably one of my most interesting stories was flying to New Zealand to record Tamora Morrison as Boss, the player character for Star Wars Republic Commando. He was so generous with his time, and then afterwards he was like, "Well, hey, let's go grab dinner, and hey, there's a show in town. Let's go do that." And I ended up hanging out with him for a week. I think the dog. I have a dog, and he's hearing something. In case you're wondering what that is.
That's all good.
So that was a really great experience going down there. And so that'll continue at Celebration. I'll have some special guests on the stage, and
have
hopefully
you met
get to
or talked with J.J. Abrams or the new creators behind the camera yet? No.
No.
Well, the amazing thing is that they're shooting in London, right? Are they wrapped on Episode 8 already?
I don't know.
Okay.
I actually have no idea. I wish I was that plugged in.
I'm sure there's going to be a few surprises based around all that.
Yeah.
Because they're building right around there. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we covered a lot of Star Wars territory. Talked a lot about all of this stuff. I definitely want to find out what you're working on now and what other kinds of projects in the David Collins world. But Blake,
Sure.
Are there any questions or any comments or anything like that from people watching?
Yeah, I don't know. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. The Last Disciple wants to know if David Collins has acted in Star Wars Rebels.
Last Disciple wants to know if you've acted in the Star Wars Rebels TV show.
No, I've auditioned a few times, but so far that hasn't happened. Charlie, my dog, is like barking at something like that. He's like, "Yeah, put David in Star Wars Rebels." I try not to bug. I've done so many panels with Dave Filoni over the years.
Yeah.
And I really try not to cross that line of like, "Hey, man, you got to put me in the show."
Yeah.
I would kill to do it. I watch it every week, obviously.
It's a great show.
He must, yeah. He's that whole team is just so great, and I certainly have a lot of friends on that show. One of these days, if something's right and I'm right for it, then who knows? Maybe fingers crossed that'll happen.
Awesome. Who'd you play? Were you on the Clone Wars show?
No, I think the closest I came to that was being on the Blu-ray doing my hosting gig.
That's cool.
I was in a lot of Clone Wars video games. I think at one point I did Battle Droids and Star Wars: The Clone Wars Republic Heroes.
Yep.
I even played General Grievous once in a game, and Darth Maul actually in Force Unleashed. But no, not Clone Wars and not Rebels. I did the Force Awakens, and I've been working on other stuff. I've been lucky enough since I moved here to LA, to get cast in smaller parts in some animated series. I'm sorry, my dog is just cracking me up.
Oh, it's okay. It's all good.
Can you guys hear that?
Yes, but it's totally cool. We've had babies and all kinds of. We've had whole families come in and intrude on interviews, so it's good.
Well, I'll bring him on screen towards the end.
Okay.
But basically, it's so hot out. Every time he sees another dog, he starts crying, and
he's concerned.
Yeah, but it's so hot out right now that I've been lucky. He hasn't heard anything up until now. But anyway, I've been working on some animated stuff here in LA, just here and there. Probably the biggest thing that I'm working on right now, and the thing that I am most excited about, is that I'm working on a project for a medical device company, and this goes back to what I was saying about people from LucasArts and what George Lucas built suddenly plugging in different ways. And basically, there's a company called Achille Interactive that is making a medical device to basically diagnose and potentially treat ADHD. We have a project called Project Evo, which is currently in phase 3 testing with the FDA to basically be used as a medical device to treat ADHD. And there are a lot of applications, but basically there was a neuroscientist named Dr. Adam Ghazali who, oh, that's what it is. My wife got home, so he was seeing. Dr. Ghazali from UCSF basically created a game called NeuroRacer that used this thing called interference training, which is it forces your brain. It was kind of a racing game on an iPad, and it forces your brain to multitask. And you can, it turns out, really target. You can really target whatever kind of interference is going on. And really flex it and work it like a muscle, and that's basically what Achille is doing. There's a whole team, and it's just so above my. I'm not a doctor, obviously. I have a history in game development, but there's a whole team out in Boston that has basically looked to the game development discipline to make this medical device. And so I wrote a whole orchestral score for it, been writing the story for it, doing sound design.
That's amazing.
And
so this will go to patients, or will this go to gamers to understand a little bit more about what people are going through, or both?
It'll go to, it could go to both, but really the idea is that to put it in the hands of patients.
Yeah.
It's been in clinical trials. It is continuing to be in clinical trials. The thing about Achille and Achille Interactive, and if people are interested, they can go to AchilleInteractive.com. It's AKILI Interactive.com. And the mission of the company is to really make it the most legitimate, most trusted, and most effective medical device as possible. It feels like a video game, but that's the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down, right? So that's kind of what we do. But on the Boston side of the company, their job is to basically work with the medical industry to basically bring this new form of digital medicine to the market and to patients specifically. And it's been really, really exciting to work on. And the nice thing about that is that, it was started by my good friend Matt Omernick, who was the lead artist on Star Wars The Force Unleashed, and Adam Piper, who was one of the designers and programmers. And they started it, with the good folks in Boston at Pure Tech and out of his friendship with the neuroscientists at UCSF. So it's like this whole, years in the making process to suddenly see, the game discipline enter the medical space has just been mind-blowing to me. And what an opportunity.
I believe in games as therapy in a big way. I think that's a fantastic, what a fantastic endeavor.
Yeah, so let's get it certified and routed through the FDA, and let's get it to be as legitimate an option for treatment as possible. I mean, that's really been the exciting thing to watch. And it's funny, I was at the X-Tech conference, which was at the Metron in San Francisco with Achille a few weeks ago, and I saw Shuhei Yoshida walking around.
Right.
He's the president of Worldwide Studios for Sony, right?
Yeah.
So normally when he walks around the booth or the floor at E3 or GDC, he's going to be mobbed if he's not, escorted from place to place. But at this neuro gaming conference, he was just kind of walking around, and really taking it in. And it was this real understanding to me that this is an exciting new, cutting edge space for game developers like me to work in, to be able to work in the medical device space like this. And, that's really exciting. So who knows what the future holds, but we feel good about it.
As you should, man. I mean, we can talk forever, and I think that we definitely have to do this again very soon because there's so much cool stuff going on. And as I said to everybody, it's impossible to encapsulate all the cool things that you're working on. You must feel incredibly blessed to be able to have all of these different experiences, come through your life like that. It's I talk to tons and tons of people, and a lot of folks get they have great jobs and great projects and stuff that they're working on, but so many of them just are really focused on them being on something for many, 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 many years. And I think this, because I can certainly attest to that too. I've had a lot of different crazy opportunities as well in my line of work. It's incredible to just have these different options like this happen all the time, right?
Yeah, I feel so lucky, and I don't take one moment of it for granted, and I hope that I continue to earn my place in being a part of these small, even a small part of some of these great projects. I'm so happy that I get to do what I'm doing in Achille. I'm so happy for the years of Star Wars games and still getting to work with Lucasfilm this summer at Celebration, my years at Sony, getting a chance to talk to you, and just having an opportunity to just talk and discuss all this stuff that we love, and I think that entertainment is extremely important, and I think it's important to people's overall happiness, and I think you need to. I think it's great to basically know other people in entertainment that are so like enthusiastic and personally invested in it, and I think that's why you and I are friends, and I hope we see even more cool stuff in the future, and I'm sure we will, and hopefully both be here to talk about it.
Yeah, man. Well, I definitely want to orchestrate that again. And listen, if you've got other questions, actually, Blake, before we go, are there any other questions that?
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear some.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if my mic's working, but Al Bunk wants to know who has been your favorite character to voice so far in your career.
Al Bunk wants to know who has been your favorite character to voice in your career so far.
Boy, I would have to say Han Solo, and it's just because it was such a if you have Star Wars Commander, I played Han Solo on Star Wars Commander. I've done a little bit on other projects here and there. Certainly, I did some radio dramas at Celebration where I played Han Solo, and
that's awesome.
That was just like a dream come true.
Do you do a Harrison Ford impression like that kid that was in that Adelaide movie, or?
I don't really look like him, but I think I just started going, "Never tell me the odds," that kind of stuff, and
awesome.
And it just, especially when he gets cross and he starts yelling, I think that's all how it all started. I was doing temp for Indiana Jones and the Staff of Kings back in 2008 or 9.
Right.
And eventually did some radio drama stuff, some podcasts, and people saw it, and it just kind of kept taking off. And, especially first thing in the morning, I can really, really cross. And
I really need some coffee.
Yeah, exactly. I really need some coffee.
Yeah.
But that was really fun. Proxy was great because it just kicked off so many different things. Played a really crazy character in God of War Ascension called Castor the Prophet, which was just insane. So getting to act with T.C. Carson as Kratos was great. I don't know. There's a lot. There's some stuff that I've already recorded that I can't quite talk about that I'm really excited about that's coming up.
Awesome.
So hopefully I'll have a different answer next time we talk.
Well, that will be the what precipitates us getting together again on this podcast for sure. But let's go with one last question, Blake.
Okay. Ian Muto wants to know, will there ever be a Star Wars celebration in Canada?
Ian Muto wants to know, will there ever be, good question, Ian, a Star Wars celebration in Canada?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. Now, whereabouts? You're thinking Vancouver?
I think Vancouver would be a perfect place to have one of those. But I know a lot of people watching would love Toronto because it's the center of the universe in Canada.
Right. Yeah. Well, how about both?
Yeah.
I hope so. I would love that. I want to see, I'm just glad that Celebration is now in its second year in a row.
Yeah.
I hope that means that we'll see more celebrations in different parts of North America and different parts of the world as well. There was once a celebration in Japan back in 2008, I believe. So I think we should definitely take that into consideration. I wish I had the power to say, but it's not up to me.
All you can do, whisper in people's ears. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, are you going to be at Comic-Con?
So no, Comic-Con is actually the following. This will be the first time I haven't been at Comic-Con in a few years. But Comic-Con is the following week, and so my wife and I have decided to turn Celebration into a little European vacation.
Oh, good for you.
I'll be playing Chevy Chase, and no, I have no idea. No, but we're gonna basically take a vacation and decided to just stay in Europe for another week after Celebration. And normally she works Comic-Con and I work Comic-Con, but not this year. maybe next year.
Well, that sounds like a great plan. David, have an awesome time. I probably won't get a chance to talk with you before Star Wars Celebration, but have an awesome time there. And thank you so much for being in Vic's basement. This has been a great thrill for me. You're a great dude, and you know, it's clear, and I think everybody that's watched this can understand why you have been so busy and had so many cool opportunities. You deserve every single one of them, my friend. Thank you.
Well,
thank you for being on Vic's basement.
Thanks so much, Victor. I really appreciate it, and thanks to everyone that's watching and listening.
All right. All right, guys, we'll be back again very soon with a brand new Vic's Basement. Thanks for watching, everybody. And don't forget Stitcher! You can get it on Stitcher.